When games are localized, they tend to go through a fair amount of changes. The process of localizing a game is to make a game make sense outside the location where it comes from. Translation and localization are two different things. It's very common for a game's script to change during its translation, but what isn't as common are games losing out content as a result of localization. This is my new sort of series thing I'm calling Lost in Localization, a series where I cover games and the content they lost in the process of their localization, things removed or made inaccessible in games when they left their home region into other regions of the world. Today I'll be covering one of my favorite game series, the Mega Man Star Force games. I'll be covering all three games in this one video, as on their own, each game doesn't have a whole lot of stuff, not really enough to justify a video for each of them, so I'll be covering all three in this one video. So without further ado, let's just get right into it, starting with Mega Man Star Force 1. Mega Man Star Force was first released in Japan on December 14th, 2006, with a release in North America on August 7th, 2007, and releases in Australia and the Greater Europe in November of 2007. With nearly a year gap between the release, surely it's bound to have some differences. The biggest change between the Japanese release and the international releases is a bit more well-known one, and that is the removal of an entire crossover section of the game. In Japan, Mega Man Star Force was able to connect and partake in a crossover with another game, that game being Boktai DS, or as the rest of the world knows it as, Lunar Nights. Mega Man crossovers with the Boktai series have a bit of history, with the series prior to Star Force, Mega Man Battle Network, also featuring crossovers with the GBA Boktai series. Upon completing the crossover content, you'll receive special battle cards for use in Mega Man Star Force. These cards are based off the characters in Lunar Nights. When localizing the game, this crossover was removed and the cards were made inaccessible, but thanks to the wonderful world of hacking, it's actually possible to put the cards back into your save with the use of an action replay, but they didn't outright delete all of the references to the games in the data. After doing some research, I was unable to find any reasoning as to why the crossover was removed, but seeing how Boktai 3's crossover with Battle Network 6 was also removed, it's likely scrapped due to the lack of interest in the Boktai series outside of Japan. Might also be the reasoning behind the name change from Boktai DS to Lunar Nights. Another thing removed from Star Force 1 is a connection to a real-life toy. A real-life version of Geo's Wave Transer was sold and is able to connect to the Japanese version of Star Force 1. Doing so will allow you to send boosts over to your save and powering up Mega Man. Another use for it allows you to boost the power of your battle cards by scanning a real-life version of said battle card. This will allow you to make it deal more damage. While there is also no reasoning outright given that I could find, it's likely because these sort of things just never really take off outside of Japan. Other regions aren't really big on buying more accessories to use for their games or systems. This is sort of similar to the e-reader being a flop outside of Japan, as nobody was really interested in buying it and all the other things that would have to go along with it. So that's only my assumption. As far as I could find, there was no outright reason given as to why this was removed. Star Force 2 was released in Japan on November 22nd, 2007, North America on June 24th, 2008, and finally Europe in October 31st, 2008. This game also features a few changes made to this game. In fact, one of them you'll probably have seen mentioned all over forum posts at the time. It's that the European version actually got the short end of the stick this time around. The PAL versions of the game lack two things that are in the other versions of the game. Well, one technically, but two if you consider that one of them is just another way to use the main thing. In Star Force 2, by going into the menu and selecting the Mega button, and then pressing Select, will allow you to input secret wave commands. These can be used for changing the state at which Mega Man will be when you enter battles, and even giving him some boosts. This was completely removed from the European versions of the game, and pressing Select on the same screen does nothing there. The other thing lacking is that the PAL versions don't have the blank cards, which are also used with wave commands, but to turn the blank cards into any card you want from a list of ones that you can actually use. Instead, all the places where you'd get blank cards in the PAL versions are replaced completely with money, except for the very first blank card, which there's nothing. You don't get anything in the European versions. I looked around and couldn't find any reasoning behind this change either, and unlike the others, I can't even offer up a good guess as to why it got canned. Even if you hack a blank card into your save on a PAL version of the game, trying to use it just crashes the game, so not even hacking will help you this time around. I'm clueless as to why it got scrapped, and even to this day there are some forum posts of people that are just now getting into these series and finding all these FAQs or sites that reference the wave commands and realizing they can't use it. It's certainly an odd change for them to have made. And finally, Star Force 2 in Japan also featured connectivity with another version of the wave scanner, much like Star Force 1. Connecting it here also allows you to do the same things as well. Oh, and the Japanese version also contains some voice acting that's also missing in all the other versions. This one contains one of the biggest localization changes, well, if you're European at least, as Star Force 3 never got a release in Europe. Released on November 13th, 2008 in Japan and June 30th, 2009 in North America, chances are if you're from Europe and played this game, you probably imported it from North America or bought it from someone who did import it. Thank goodness the DS isn't region locked. Outside of the obvious lack of a European release, Star Force 3 still contains a decent amount of stuff that is lacking from the North American release. The big one is something just about everyone knows. In fact, if you have one fact about this game, it's probably this. Cut from the North American version is something known as the Noise Kaizo gear. The Noise Kaizo gear is a set of functions in the game that can be compared to the Navi Customizer from the Mega Man Battle Network games. The Noise Kaizo gear consists of a few menus that revolve around use of a system very similar to that of the wave commands. In fact, it works basically the same exact way. You input secret codes to get various effects. While the vast majority of the system was removed from the North American version, one part of it still remains. If you've ever used the white card screen in your copy, that's actually a part of the Noise Kaizo gear, and it's the only thing that remains accessible normally without the use of hacking. The Noise Kaizo gear has a few more functions: white cards, noise cards, satellite cards, purpose cards, and transformation cards. White cards give you 4 extra battle cards added to your folder that can be used to combo with other cards. Noise cards provide modification to Mega Man's performance and stats. Satellite cards allow you to access the satellite server to draw special battle cards for a turn. Purpose cards modify the stats of your battle cards and your finalized form. They can even be shared with your brother bands upon beating the game. And finally, the transformation cards, which allow you to change your noise form at will, but will restrict you to a preset folder if you do. The preset folder is based on the element of the noise form that you choose, and you can actually level up the noise form to get better folders out of it as well. Now, most of this was made inaccessible in the North American version, but not exactly removed. With the use of an action replay, it's possible to re-enable the use of the Noise Kaizo gear. By using any of the menus reveals that it's likely this was scrapped later into the localization process, as everything is translated into English. All the cards, all the information, all the dialogue, everything is completely translated into English. If you set up any of the cards, save, and then play your copy without an action replay, this actually will allow you to keep all your modifications. However, you just won't be able to go back into the menus to modify any of them without the action replay being back in. The only exception to this is that you can technically go into the menu and see your noise cards, but after you remove them, you can't add them back without having the action replay code re-enabled. While looking into why this was cut, I found an article on the Mega Man Network that talks about how the content was cut not out of spite, but out of issues getting the required means to make all the codes for all the menus accessible. You see, in Japan, the codes used for all the Noise Kaizo gear menus could be found in various forms of media, like the anime, the guidebook, magazines, any sort of thing like that. The money needed to repeat the same thing in North America would be insane. They'd have to secure deals with magazines, they'd have to get a whole bunch of spots with other game guides or any sort of just general guide for any games or any of those tips or trick books, and then spots on the TV networks. The anime dub ended really early. The video game guidebooks were just dying in favor of sites like Game FAQs. and people weren't really reading magazines at that point, so it was unlikely for them to reach the audience for it either. The white code cards were put in the official guide as well as made on Capcom International's website, but that seems to have been it. It seems it was decided against including it simply due to the effort and money needed to make all the codes accessible, which is a shame to say the least. The amount of effort it would have taken and the amount of money it would take to get all these deals done was probably not worth it, seeing as they also cut a release in an entire region of the world. It's likely they didn't really want to spend a whole lot of money to make all this stuff accessible, and they didn't have the money to do it either. While if you think about it, Star Force 3 lacks the least amount of changes, it has one of the biggest changes out of all the games in the series. While it's still accessible through the use of hacking, this is something considered to be lost to a normal player that might not have any idea what this system is and doesn't have any access to any sort of cheating devices like the Action Replay. Then there we have it, content lost to the process of localization. Even though it's a shame that these games lost out on some of the content, they can still be enjoyed through importing the games or by using devices like Action Replay. Not all of it was completely lost, but still lost on someone coming in with no idea of the existence of said content. I mentioned earlier in the video that the missing crossover with the Boktai DS paralleled a scrapped crossover in Mega Man Battle Network 6. And maybe one day I'll cover stuff through the Battle Network series as well, as those also lost quite a bit through the localization process. Regardless of the state we got these games in outside of Japan, I find them all to be rather enjoyable in their own right. If you're curious about the stuff that I showed, specifically stuff like the Boktai crossover and the Wave Scanner, I suggest looking in the description as I will link both videos that I used in this so you can watch those in full for yourself.